from Syria, who's trying to get his family across the Mediterranean to safety, is in the hold of a boat, a trafficker's boat. His wife Martha is telling his daughter Amira a story. His wife had been speaking to Amira in a low voice, a story about a girl who'd been taken prisoner by a king who wanted to marry her. But he was old and very ugly, and she would never love him, so he kept her locked away in a room in a tower filled with pretty things, all sorts of jewellery and clothes and instruments. And clowns and performers were sent every day to amuse her, but she spent her days sitting by a window feeding a tiny bird that landed on the sill, and whispering to the bird. And the king would visit in the evening, but the girl would never speak to him. And he asked his best archer to kill the bird one day, and he watched from afar as a slender arrow pierced the bird's breast right there as the girl was speaking to it. And he watched as she sat there crying silently for hours, and her tears formed a pool around the bird's little body. And eventually the king regretted what he'd done, and he tried to command all the birds of the sky to visit the girl and to sit on her sill while she spoke to them. But the birds wouldn't listen. They wouldn't even stay still while he shouted at the sky and the trees. And the king's rage flooded through him, and it drove him insane. And he asked all of his archers to kill every bird in the kingdom, and they obeyed him because they were afraid of him. And the killing of the birds took years and years, and cost the king all his gold and all his castles, because he had to recruit archers from all over the world to kill the birds. But eventually the skies of the kingdom were empty, and birdsong was never heard again. And the king was a feeble old man, living in a tiny shack in a silent forest. And the girl had long escaped the tower and returned to her home and her family. And the king had long forgotten why he hated birds so much, why he'd killed them all, why he had lost his very kingdom in the cause of their annihilation. And Farouk wondered why Martha had chosen a story so sad, why she had made her daughter cry. And he realised that every other passenger had fallen silent, and they were all looking now at his wife. And the only light there in the hold was from the slit along the jamb of the hatch above them, and from the torches of iPhones. But he could see that some of the women and the girls had tears in their eyes, and some of the men had thoughtful expressions, and some looked angry. And the only sound was his daughter's low sobs as she clung fast to her mother, and the sound of his wife saying, "Hush, love, it's not a true story, it's a fable." And its moral is how useless it is to blame others for things not being as we'd like them to be. And a man stood, and Farouk expected him to rebuke Martha for telling such a story. And he prepared himself to defend his wife, to cut the man down to size, to tell him to be quiet, to keep his whining to himself, that he should be ashamed of himself for taking so to heart a story told by a woman to her child. But the man just said, "The life jackets. We got that boy because he said to be replaced. Come on, my friends, we have to see the captain and the crew. We can't just sit here in the dark like fools." And a voice behind him said, "There are no life jackets on this boat. There is no captain. There is no crew. There's nothing on this boat but us." Thank you. I'd like to choose about that man Farouk, a doctor from Syria who took his family across the Mediterranean and boat. Realised that